just going to work 1,000 a week. And you kind of look back and say, that's about an oil change every 4 weeks. That's, 12, 13 oil changes a year, 130 quarts of oil a year. So I'm sitting here this morning with Ed, and we're talking about a somewhat famous, maybe worldwide known 2003 996 Turbo that I bought in July of 2003. I am the original owner of the car. It was purchased in July 22 years ago. It's currently sitting at 746,200-ish miles, 300-ish miles. I bought the car after I had an '02 Turbo that had an unfortunate ending and was lusting for another car. I had originally looked at this car when it came into the Rhode Island dealership, Inskip, Porsche. Unfortunately, the timing at that point wasn't what it was supposed to be, and I went back there 9 months later when I was needing a new 996 Turbo, and this one was sitting on the dealer lot with 292 miles. I purchased it, and I've owned it for all those years. I've driven it every one of those miles. I have enjoyed every single solitary mile in that car. And I must add, of all the 746,002 to 300 miles, I was at an event this past weekend with a group called Mezger's Only, called Strass 2025. Josh from Smoky Mountain took us on a ride on Tuesday through some roads in the Great Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, first of which was Hellbender, the second which was Sherahala Skyway, out to Tennessee. We came back in the afternoon on Sherahala Skyway, and then took 129 back to the resort that we stayed at. And when we got back to the resort at the end of the day, I was commenting with the group at the end of the day that of all the miles I've driven, that by far was the day that I will probably remember for the rest of my life of all the driving I've done in that car. The car is built for the roads that we were on. It was absolutely perfect. It's the big sweepers, third, fourth, fifth gear, is just going as fast as and heavy as you want to go. And it was probably the most memorable driving day of the entire time that I've owned the car, over 22 years. So that's how I got into the car. That's how I found the car. I am an engineer by degree. I've also got an MBA. I've been self-employed for over 25 years in the biotech industry. I live in Southern Rhode Island, and I have driven from my home in Southern Rhode Island to Boston and the Burbs area for biotech work as an independent consultant for all of the 22 years. So the mileage has been primarily commuter miles. It was delivered with a factory aero kit, factory PCCBs, factory X50 power kit. The car has got no modifications to it other than a suspension, and I've got much larger intercoolers than what came with the factory. It's got a tune on it, and I put a factory stainless steel roll cage and factory 997 GT2, GT3 RS 2-piece carbon fiber bucket seats in it with harnesses for the days that I go to the track. So everyone asked me, like, where did all those miles come from, and how many sets of this, and how many this, and how many sets of tires, and how many oil changes, and what's the secret? My typical response is Mobil 1 040 5,000 mile oil changes religiously. Drive the car. When things break, go fix it. And I've gotten to a point with all of the history in that car where I'm going to call it corrective maintenance is now, like, you understand that the sequence of things needing to be replaced, or you just innately feel something just from so much seat time, that it's turned into preventative maintenance. So I'm trying to get out in front of things breaking. It's not that things don't still break and you got to bring it in, but generally I'm trying to stay out in front of it. A lot of people have asked me, how many clutches have you been through? That's a very, and I just literally put my third clutch in that car. I get about 350 to 380,000 miles out of a clutch, and everyone's like, oh, it's all highway miles. I'm like, have you looked at the traffic reports for Boston? I said, I am on and off that clutch all day long sitting in traffic. These commutes have, in some cases, been, think my worst commute was 9 hours and 50 minutes one night getting home from Boston in a snowstorm on a Friday. It was a Friday the 13th in December of '07, I believe it was. There was a really nasty snowstorm. It took me 9 hours and 50 minutes to get home from Boston. Commute to Boston has ranged from probably as few as 70-ish, low 70s to 100 each way. So I'm putting 150 to 200 miles a day on the car. So just going to work 1,000 a week. And you kind of look back and say, that's about an oil change every 4 weeks. That's, 12, 13 oil changes a year, 130 quarts of oil a year, I can't say there's been an actual single failure. I've been stranded in that car. I'm going to knock on some good old wood here. I've been stranded in that car probably 4 or 5 times. One in particular was I was driving to work one morning and I was on 95 in Providence. It's 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. There's 2 vehicles up in front of me and there's a couple of big sweepers on 95 going through Providence. And it's really early in the morning. I'm still sipping my coffee. Truck 2 in front of me hits an 8-foot long 4x4 that starts to barrel roll and bounce on the highway with about a 3-foot oscillation. The car in front of me swerves, clips it, starts the thing spinning and bouncing. I saw it in just the nick of time. I grabbed the wheel, thankfully looked quickly to my right. Nobody was there, thank God. And the right front tire and right front radiator took a good hit. Bent a rim, flattened a tire, and found out that, that was one of those, well, I'm stranded. I got to call AAA and get the car towed up to the mechanic. Radiator hose had become somewhat dislodged. I think we repaired the rim. It wasn't bent to the point where it couldn't be repaired at the time. New tire, and off I went a couple times later. I got stuck once when, this was around 373,000 miles. I had to replace the clutch, and the clutch that was in it was fine, actually. The pressure plate actually had cracked on the car. So I got stranded that time. We took the clutch out, at this point, 373,000 miles. The friction material on the clutch, and it was 90% still there. And everyone's like, well, what's your trick with the clutch? I'm like, rev match, and don't beat the hell out of it. It's not rocket science, right? So anyways, I ended up, because of the age and I thought of fatigue on the springs and the clutch plate and everything else, we replaced the flywheel, clutch, and pressure plate and 2 bearings, and that went another 350,000 miles. At 423,000 miles, the original transmission finally gave up the ghost. We pulled it apart, looked inside, and said it's time for a rebuild. Found out that a factory new from Germany transmission was actually cheaper than rebuilding the transmission that was in it. So I took the transmission the original transmission, put it in a box, and bought a new transmission, put it in. That transmission went all the way to last summer at 715-ish thousand miles, or 20-ish thousand miles. The clutch pedal was getting very heavy, and it had 350,000 miles on it. So again, I'm thinking to myself, it's springs, it's retainers, it's tired. We tried the slave cylinder replacement, tried the expansion tank replacement. None of that worked. Finally said, it's probably just fatigue in long-term use on that clutch. So we decided to send the original transmission. The one that was in it was working fine, the replacement transmission. So we sent the original transmission out to Nevada, had it rebuilt with factory components from GT2 RS, GT3 RS, current standard stuff, and replaced the clutch, pressure plate, flywheel, and put the rebuilt original transmission back in. And now I have a spare transmission sitting in a box in the garage. So you were asking about things that have left me stranded. It's only been 4 or 5 times. And again, I'm going to knock on wood. The car is built to be driven. It's extremely reliable when it's driven and maintained, and it doesn't take anything more than drive it and change oils. So we replaced the clutch and everything at 373. At 383,000 miles, the car had one of the turbos in the back, the internal wastegate. There's a mechanical arm that mechanically attaches to a poppet valve, basically. That's your blow-off valve inside the turbo. That had sheared We went in and looked at it with a borescope and saw that it was broken. So I said, okay, a few minor oil leaks. I said, let's pull the engine out, reseal it, replace the turbos. As an engineer, curiosity killed me. And I said, let's take the engine apart and just see what's inside. I had heard or read somewhere along the lines that Porsche had basically said 250,000 miles, the engine will be bulletproof. And I was 50% beyond that. So as an engineer, it was intellectual curiosity more than anything. There was no need to take the engine apart at that point. It was running fine. It was just really, I wanted to see what did it look like inside after all these miles, because there was no history at that point of a 996 turbo that I was aware of that had that kind of miles on it. So we pulled the engine apart, pulled the heads apart, and what we found inside was a factory new engine. There's cylinders, Nicosil liners inside the cylinder. They still had the factory hatch marks in it. You could still see the valves, the guides, the chain guides for the cams and stuff. Everything was in brand new shape. We were blown away at what we found. There were probably 2 bearings on the crank where you could see some very, very, very light shadowing, but there was nothing inside that engine. We had all the head train mic'd. The guy called us and said, these valves are factory new. They're factory new. So as an engineer, I say, stress and cycles is fatigue. You think about 383,000 miles. It was driven through the worst traffic in the country and tracked fairly heavily during those 383,000 miles, is probably as few as 8 to 10 and as many as 15 to 18 track days a year. So I'm like, it's prudent at this point, more than anything, to replace wear items. So we replaced wear items, put it back together, and the engine sits today with that same rebuild on it. And everyone says, oh my God, it's not original, so it doesn't count. And I said, well, it was intellectual curiosity. We had the engine out a year ago last summer for another reseal. We went inside with a borescope and looked inside, and the mechanics literally told me, we've never seen anything like this in the history of these cars. It's amazing. It's brand new inside. Same exact, it's running fine. So we resealed it, put the engine back in, and knock on wood, here we are 30,000-ish miles later, and it's still running strong. I'm a driver. Also, I would say I have a competency called, I love to be an adventurer. I love the feeling of being in the seat of that car, in my happy place. Just put the key in, turn the key, put a smile on my face, and go for a ride. I thoroughly enjoy it. I bought the car knowing that it would be a car that would be driven. And I remember after the first year, I went back to the dealership and they're like, 30,000 miles. Oh my God. It's like, nobody puts that kind of miles on this car. And I just kept driving it. And all of a sudden, 30,000 turns to 100. 100 turns to 250. 250 turns to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And here we are. It wasn't my intention to get there, but at some point, maybe after a couple 100,000 miles, I realized that I was young enough, healthy enough, and I hope to remain the same way for the next many years, that I'm going for $1 million. I'm just going to do it. It just kind of fell into place as a result of the enjoyment that I was having with the car. I knew at the time when I bought the car that I was going to be making a commute to Boston, and everyone's like, just buy a beater and go to Boston. I'm like, I'm going to buy a car that I've wanted since I was 7 or 8 years old, and I'm going to go drive it. So I bought the car as a commuter, and I wanted to drive it. And it's a car that I've wanted for a really long time. I've never second-guessed that decision. I've never second-guessed the decision to drive the car every day. I've never second-guessed putting snow tires and sticking it into 14 inches of light, fluffy snow and taking it out for a ride and thoroughly enjoying a car that's probably one of the most snow-capable cars I've ever driven in my life. It didn't start that way, but at some point, I don't know, was it 250,000 miles, 300,000-400,000? I'm like, I'm going for $1 million. I'm going for $1 million. And that's one of the first questions people ask, how many miles? How many miles yet? There was an article written in Haggerty magazine, a guy named David Holtzman, who lives in Lexington, Mass, reached out to me. He wrote an article way back in the day about Irv Gordon, who had the 3 million mile Volvo way back when. And he said, I heard about your car. I've written an article on this guy that's got a long history with a certain car. I want to know your story. I want to write an article for Haggerty. So that published, my goodness, that had to be 6-7 years ago maybe at this point. It was in the spring of, it was before COVID, 18 or 19 maybe. I've lost track of the time now. Anyways, after the article published, David reached out to me and he said, my editors received a phone call from somebody in New York who would like to speak to you about the car. And we don't know what the content or intent of this call is going to be, but we won't release any information unless you give us the authorization to do so. So I said, yeah, it's probably just somebody who wants to talk about the car. I said, absolutely, let them reach out to me. So somebody reached out to me from, I believe it was from New York is what I was told. And I get a text message literally a half an hour later after I said yes. You know, we're going back and forth for a couple minutes. I'm like, was there something specific you wanted to talk to me about? And he said, I really want to know how much you want for the car. And I said, the car's not for sale. And he goes, no, I want to know what you would like to get for that car. I want to buy that car. And I'm like, the car is not for sale. And it continued several text messages. And he says, I have the money in the account. Give me your bank account number. I'll have it wired in 10 minutes. Tell me what you want for the car. And my final response was, you can't put enough zeros to the left side of the decimal point to make me want to sell the car. I have no intentions of ever selling it. My kids will, I have 2 daughters. They will get the car when I am no longer here on this earth to drive the car. I hope that they get to enjoy it. My grandkids get to enjoy it for many, many generations to come.
This month of VINwiki content is brought to you by Bridgestone, and the most exciting news out of Bridgestone is the new release of their Turanza Prestige tire. It is their flagship Grand Touring tire, targeting luxury SUVs, crossovers, and sedans, like a Mercedes S-Class or a BMW X7. And this gives you all the whisper quiet ride that you want in a high-end luxury experience, as well as the wet and dry weather performance that we love from Bridgestone. And you'll get some of the greatest longevity they've ever had on street tires, 70,000 mile limited warranty. So we love Bridgestone for their sports car and supercar tires in the Potenza range. Of course, the Dueler AT Ascent that I've got on my Porsche Cayenne, I absolutely love. But whatever you're looking to find tires for, Bridgestone has something great. So check them out now at the link in the description below to learn more about the Bridgestone family of tires.